What's up everyone? Welcome back to the channel. This is the Z-List Cars. My name is Matt, and behind me, let's just get right to it. This is a C8 Corvette. With this used car spotlight sort of idea being applied to today's review, obviously this is quite a special one for me. The C8 Corvette represents essentially the upper echelon of performance cars that I've driven. I've never driven a Lamborghini or McLaren or Ferrari. Driven a lot of cool stuff, a lot of M cars, AMG cars, Porsches, supercharged Jags, stuff like that. You know, a lot of Corvettes in the past, but the C8, today's my first real day spending a lot of time in it. I've taken one around the block recently and borrowed this one for the afternoon to spotlight that despite this crazy used car market that we are in right now, this car still, even at the highly inflated, highly over sticker price market that this represents right now on the C8s, I still think it's worth it. I think it's worth every penny. And in fact, when you compare it to the competitors that go for 2, 3, and sometimes 4 times the amount of this, well, it may not be quite as exotic in the materials and the sounds as some of the exotics. It really is a budget alternative, in my opinion, to something like a McLaren. This particular example is a very low mileage 2021 2LT in Sebring Orange over jet black interior. Now this does not have the optional Z51 package that adds items like the performance exhaust, electronic limited slip differential, let's see, rear spoiler, magnetic ride control, and a few other odds and ends. And for those who aren't immediately familiar with the C8 Corvette, just a real quick overview. The huge headlines when this car came out, I believe in late 19 as a 2020 model, were Mid-Engined Corvette. That is just the first time in 8 generations dating back to the early 1950s that the Corvette, America's sports car, has not been a front engine rear-wheel drive. Well, it's still rear-wheel drive, and now the engine is behind the front wheels for better weight distribution. And this car could go 0 to 60 in 2.8 seconds, the magazines were testing at the time. No more manual transmission, only a General Motors in-house developed double clutch transmission, and 490 horsepower, MSRP of a 1LT starting a hair under $60,000. Now, those headlines and those numbers make it one of the best, unquestionable performance cars in the world ever in terms of value. However, nobody's paying that. There's a lucky few who've been able, I'm sure, to have ordered a C8 Corvette at MSRP, or maybe some internal or family deals at less. But by and large, the market for these are about 25% over sticker, even in the pre-owned market. All right, so we're going to begin a little tour of the C8. Personally, I want to start with the styling and talk about my thoughts on that quickly, and then we'll head on into the interior and go over just a few of the cool points about features and you know, elements that make the C8 unique. So on a styling note, you know, I overall just think it's an absolutely gorgeous car, and you know, it may look a little Ferrari-esque, it may look a little McLaren-esque, but you know, when you have a mid-engine layout, you sort of have to have a cab-forward design, and the car is going to take on a certain shape that can't be wildly different no matter what. And it still, to me, looks evolutionary as a Corvette. Sebring Orange color doesn't hurt at all in this application, but I think it's very well proportioned. I heard a couple reviewers say they thought the front end sat up maybe a little too high. I guess I could see where they're coming from on that, but overall I do think the car just has gorgeous lines, gorgeous proportions. It looks very futuristic without going over the top. If I had to point out one area of the vehicle that I wasn't wild about, it's probably what a lot of people have said. The taillights, they may be a little bit Camaro-esque. They may not be quite the 4 individuals that we're used to from a Corvette, but more so than that, the square exhaust is something I'm not a huge fan of personally. I actually love the C5 Corvette styling that included those oval exhaust tips. I was kind of sad when we got rid of those, but I'm not as wild about the square exhaust finishers, but I love some of the quirks. Sorry Doug, but you know, the Stingray symbol here, the fact that in the rear glass, like all of these little shapes, I don't even think you can really see them, represent in like the tint edging represent like basically a tiny stingray. And just some of the, you know, the Easter eggs. And you know, the door style has been similar for a while now. You do have the backup cylinder in here if the electronic door opener ever failed, and obviously that goes to the inside as well, where it's essentially a push button to open the door from the inside. You know, I'll go into during the drive and some interior impressions, the rear view mirror camera, and right here is where the camera is held. You can see that a little closer up. So it's pretty concealed, not very susceptible to damage, and you've got your front camera system as well on the 2LT models and up, and you've got the cameras right here and over here as well. And then for the front trunk, you've got, you know, multiple ways to open an interior button, a button on the key, and then sorry if I can find it here, sort of a hidden button under here that I'm heavily struggling to find. There we go. And you got your frunk. So that's pretty awesome. Fit a couple grocery bags in there, you know, definitely a practical bit that a Corvette's never had before. And going around to the back, all of the coupes are a removable targa top. So I have removed the top. It's just a matter of 3 latches and it pops right off. And as you see, I have stored the top in here. So pretty amazing to see that LT1 6.2 liter V8 behind the front seats. This does not have the engine dress-up kit that some of the 3LTs and Z51s have, but it is still looks magnificent back there. And this is just a hell of a car to behold. I mean, it's got a very exotic shape, very exotic looks and colors in my opinion, and it's just kind of hard to believe that this is a car that was assigned a starting price of around $60,000 by General Motors for the 2020 model year. There's a reason why these things are going so high above MSRP. So let's hop inside, check out some interior features, and then get this thing on the road. Sitting inside the C8, this is definitely the nicest Corvette interior that there ever has been. The C7 was a huge step up. It really was. You know, there was a lot more stitching, there was better materials, but you know, overall the C8 is just on another level. It feels very exotic with this driver focus center console, or center cockpit I should say, cockpit sweeping, this center control stack that is, you know, controversial, but I think is super cool, with your climate control buttons, heated and cooled seats, different modes, basically all your climate controls and seat controls, you know, your little hand rest for going to your drive mode selector, which is under here. And on the 2LT you do get the front camera system here, the front lift system. That sounds good. So you get a nice little graphic upon startup, and even in tour mode, nice digital cluster, very modern. Infotainment screen is very similar to, I know I got a bunch of glare going on here, darn white shirt, but you know, very similar to what's in the new higher end trucks, Tahoes, Escalades, well not quite Escalade, but Yukon and such. You got your volume control up here, home button, you know, quick to swipe, performance data recorder on this particular example. It's just a tremendous feature. You know, the metal speaker grills on the Bose Performance Series sound system that comes on the 2LT models and up is excellent. You know, just a lot of luxury modern touches. Again, I'm a big fan of the square steering wheel. I think it's awesome. The double clutch transmission through the metal paddles here shifts very quickly, as we'll talk about here shortly. Some quirks, like the very thin vents here for climate, they're still very effective. They have kind of a one-touch open and close, and you can just change direction. The camera mirror is very cool. So, you know, going from a mirror to a camera is something I've never experienced before, but is becoming more common. And you've even got wireless charging here between the seats, which I think is truly excellent. You have a heads-up display as well. I don't know how well you can see that in through the camera here. But just a very driver-centric, awesome cockpit, and you know, it's definitely on another level than any Corvette before. You know, I'd say the only thing that's really missing is a third pedal, but we'll talk about that here shortly during the drive. There's a pretty awesome transmission in this vehicle. Kudos to GM for this double clutch unit. However, you know, not having a manual, at least as an option in a Corvette, is tough. But with that being said, let's get this thing out on the road and have a little fun. The C8 Corvette. So, one of the first things I noticed when getting behind the wheel of the C8 is the driver-focused cockpit and how enveloped you feel in the driver's seat here. Not only the, you know, center stack of controls, this configuration here that's angled towards the driver, as well as the infotainment screen, you know, your digital cluster, the square steering wheel, all items discussed earlier. When I pulled out from the location where I borrowed it from, Hi Line Autohaus, Charlotte, North Carolina, check them out, highlineautohaus.com, I was able to instantly use my front lift system, which used to be a feature that was more or less reserved for six-figure cars, exotic cars, etc. And while C8 Corvettes are certainly six-figure cars in many instances, this has, from what I understand, one of the best front lift systems fitted to any car. You press it, within 3 seconds you lift. I had to pull out onto a road from kind of a steep little driveway. I was really nervous in a car this expensive, and it just no problem. Right away it lifted, put it back down as soon as you get on the road with the push of a button. Very easy. So the three driving modes, Tour, Sport, Track, I would really probably only try Sport on the road and really use Track on the track, since from what I've read about this car, it makes the suspension setting so firm that if you start hitting potholes and such on public roads, it might not go so well. The cluster, the fully digital cluster and gauges that are configurable and really change quite a bit per the mode that you're in, that's a very cool view. You know, interior materials being really high quality are a theme in this. You know, the stitching everywhere, the quality of the metal speaker grills, many of them have carbon fiber trim, just lots of stitching. It really is really a nice place to be, and the seats are very comfortable and supportive. Visibility is excellent, and one of the most major visibility flaws in this car, out the back, as many mid-engine cars are, with this sort of steeply raked rear glass where you can only see through a little sliver, that is fixed by your rear view camera here, as the mirror has the General Motors feature that's in a lot of other cars as well, where you can, by the flip of a switch, change it from a camera to a mirror. So this actually right now is my first time experiencing a rear view camera moving continuously in your mirror, and I must admit it's a little distracting, more so than my heads-up display, but it's pretty cool, and it really opens up visibility in a car that has very little of it otherwise. We'll say when you get on it a bit, you hear a nice little exhaust and intake growl from right behind you, and that is just such a cool thing to me. It just might be a really budget-friendly alternative to consider instead of spending so much on something like a, you know, newer, more entry-level mid-engine McLaren or Ferrari or Lamborghini. Maybe save the money, have a couple other cars, and get a C8 Corvette, possibly hold out for a Z06. It really is that good in terms of performance feel, and obviously power is our most grip levels are just very confidence-inspiring. You know, I'm not going to say they're quite to the levels of the 911. I was lucky enough to drive a 992 recently, just a base Carrera, but to be able to hustle it around some corners and oh man, that could get pretty addicting. What was I saying? So I was able to drive a 992 recently and had just a lot of fun with the levels of grip and just some of the best steering I've ever experienced in a car. But the C8 steering is excellent. Sport mode is a happy place to be on the road, especially on a back road like I'm on now. And braking is very strong. In my opinion, there's no weak points. There's no real downsides to point out in the driving experience of the C8. Power is immediate. The newer LT1 here has instant throttle response. There's no waiting for torque. It's smooth. I could easily hit the highway and take a 3-4 hour ride and be fine. I mean, if we're talking 9-10 hour, that might be a little different, but it's very civilized. I mean, as you see, I'm kind of driving in moderate to light traffic situations here in sport mode, and I just can't keep my foot out of it though. Yeah, that is a treat. And I will say, as far as the manual aspect of these go, yes, some are going to really miss that third pedal. You know, a lot. I would definitely be having fun if I had a nice short throw 6 or 7 speed right now and a clutch pedal. However, hats off to General Motors for nearly everything about this car. This is a tremendous effort for a domestic car. And I shouldn't even say the qualifier for a domestic car. They've really gotten that good, and this is an example of it. And another point I was getting to is about the transmission. This double clutch transmission, to my understanding, manufactured in-house by GM, is awesome. It's terrific. It's very quick shifting, very smooth. It's never confused. Even if you leave it in auto, it's really civilized and smooth, even in traffic. All in all, the driving experience is tremendous, and the whole car, the interior materials, the looks, the engineering of changing the entire configuration of America's sports car. And you know, I happen to live in the States, and I'm a German car guy by and large as far as performance cars go up until this point. I've always admired American muscle cars. I've never had one, but I'm extremely impressed, and I just think this, like many other reviews have expressed, I mean, this is a world-class sports car, and anyone who says otherwise, I'll argue to the finish. Well, that was a fun ride. This is in the upper echelon of performance cars that I've ever driven, and although I haven't driven the McLarens to actually make the comparison here, I gotta say, this is an absolute world-class sports car. I mean, hats off to GM. I was blown away by the overall feel, you know, look, touch, materials, driving experience. I mean, for the money, even again, for the inflated prices, this truly is a budget alternative to someone who's, you know, considering buying a more expensive exotic car that you can spend $200,000, $300,000, $400,000 on in many cases. So if you're new to Z-List Cars, please hit that subscribe button. If you're not, thanks for coming along on another ride with me. Please hit that like button, share, follow me on Instagram at the Z-List Cars, and I will see you guys on the next one.